Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Kylie Stoltz-Descent, and I'm here on behalf of the ICA Pedagogy Committee. Today, we're joined by special guest Dr. Kristen Denny-Chambers. Kristen is a clarinetist, teacher, composer, and founder of Clarinet Playground, where everyone is invited. She is here to chat with us about student buy-in today. She is also the author of several method books and etude books, including Prep Steps Before You Crepsh and the Finger Fitness series. So we'll go ahead and turn things over to Kristen, and so welcome.
Hi, thank you, and thank you for having me do this. I'm really excited about it. Of course, I love teaching. That's like the biggest thing I do, and I've soaked up a whole lot over the years. And of course, for me, I think my teaching changes every year. I have these handouts that I take to different schools, and every year I'm updating them because I'm like, I learned something, or something didn't quite work, or I'm just trying to, refine all the time. So I would imagine a lot of teachers are like that too. So I'm going to share some of my own personal experiences today, which may or may not align with what everybody else does. But I think one of the cool things about sharing what we do is we might learn something new to take to our own studios or reinforce, hey, I do that, so that's nice. Okay. So I have a little slideshow, and I'll share that, and then we'll get going. Let's see. Okay. All right. Does that look good? Okay, so student buy-in. This is my nice little cover page. So what is student buy-in? So I did the thing that you do. You go to Webster's, and here's the actual definition: acceptance and willingness to actively support and participate in something. So I think about, to be short, students and parents, or whoever it is, they're buying you. Yeah, you're the expert, and it can be, and I know that for me, when I was younger, I was like, I know all this stuff, and I'm going to do this, and I can help you do this, and I'm this, I'm this, I'm this. But we need to take a minute and listen to what they are looking for. Yes, you're the product. How you market that matters, and they're assessing you. Is this a product that I want, that I need? So I kind of been molding that and changing that little by little over time. And so when let's say I'm reaching out to a new student, or a new student has reached out to me, or I'm reaching out to a school to come and do a clinic, they pretty much know what a clarinet teacher is going to do, like your generic stuff. But if you think about what's something that you do that's different, what's something that you do that's unique, if you can bank on one little thing that you do that's a little bit different than maybe what you would see in other studios, that's what you try to lead with, instead of, I can teach articulation, I can teach this, all the things that we know that a clarinet teacher can do. So if there's something unique that you have, or a unique skill, you can bring that to the table. And then I think, what's the difference? So how has this changed for me over time? And the hard truth is focusing on yourself versus focusing on your customer, your client, your students, right? I think when we're young, we have that feeling of, I have to show that I know all this stuff, but, relax, be confident in your knowledge. But I say pushback happens when you lead with advice. You first meet somebody and you're like, well, you've got to do this, and you should be doing this, and I'm the expert, so here's all the proof that I'm the expert, you should be doing all of this. And that can really lead to a big divide between you and your audience, or you and the students. So be humbly confident in yourself. Be willing to give things away for free, which I think is a huge selling point. Go off and do a free masterclass with a school. Give a free lesson so that someone can see if it's a good fit. And there's no need to panic or get to that point of sale right away. And they can sense that panic, right? And I know that when I was younger, I was desperate to get students. I've got to have 20 students so that I can pay my bills. But you start to morph over time as you get older, and you learn, it's just not worth it for some students that either will not practice, or maybe you have issues with parents' communication, or they show up late all the time, or unprepared. You can start to get pickier. And then I always say, be a person. So you're a human, have conversations with your students and the parents that you might be talking with, or the teachers that you might be talking with. Get to know them and kind of understand what their program is about if you're talking to a school, or understand what the student is about, the things that they like to do. Ask questions about them, what they want, what they're needing to do. and then listen and ask follow-up questions. You know, this is such a great time because I just started a new student on Wednesday, so it really helped me with my notes. So let them show you what they know, which is a nice thing. I had him play something from one of his band pieces, and then ask, well, what else do you want to know? Like, what else do you want to learn about the clarinet or about music in general? And that opens things up for really nice conversations too. Then you can share one or two tricks or suggestions. So towards the end of that particular student's lesson, there was one thing I noticed. I was like, okay, if I can work on him getting a clean connection over the break, and having that really comfortable and confident air, that's going to fix so many things. So I taught him that one trick, and he really ate it up. And so then they buy in. They're like, oh, that trick worked. Once they buy in, then they're going to actually want to listen to your advice and your direction and things like that. So it's all about kind of getting them comfortable and that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go into more detail with this, breaking down what this looks like for me anyways. And keep in mind, most of my students are middle school, high school level. So this is pre-college. These are things that have worked for me. And we'll see if there's anything here that you can take away and use for your own teaching. So I do a lot of free stuff. I will give a free first lesson. I will go out to schools and give a free first sectional. I like to have handouts, any kind of materials I can give out for free, either stuff that I've made myself or, you know, a copy from a page from my book or something like that, something that they can take home and apply. And I treat it like a consultation. Like you're the doctor and they're coming in to see, here's my problem, I have trouble with tonguing, and you're just consulting with them. Well, tell me more about that, just like a doctor, right? So treat it like a consultation. And then if you're going out and doing a class or a sectional, it can be a great recruiting tool. I often take a page and say, hey, if you're interested in lessons, sign up on this page and I'll get in touch with you and we can set that up. I can set up a free first lesson with you. And that's a great way to get your foot in the door if you're looking to go out to schools and recruit lessons that way. And then I'm as clear as I can be with communication. I am constantly wanting to make sure I am as clear as possible, because clear and direct communication, it just helps to set that comfort zone, and it makes it very clear what the expectations are. So let's say, for instance, I'm talking with a parent, the student, and we're all in the same room together. I make sure I'm direct with the parent and direct with the student. It can be really easy to shift into that talk to the adult mode. Make sure you're involving the student and speak with them directly. I'm very clear on expectations. I have a note-taking system that I use called Evernote, and we put what they're supposed to be practicing in that, and I can put in links and all kinds of nice things into that, and they know exactly what they're supposed to be working on, so there's never a time when they show up, oh, I forgot what I was supposed to do. So everything's very clear. I'm very clear about expectations. I'll say, here's this scale, and it should sound this way in a week, and I'll play it. It should be about this speed in a week, and I'll play it, so that they really understand what the expectation is. And then connecting with them, pay attention, ask questions, and I like to relate. Someone will share a story, and then I'll say, oh, I had this similar thing happen, so I understand that. Engage their responses. I kind of think of it like if it had a flow chart, that would be nice, but just, go with the flow. It's a normal conversation. If they seem really shy or timid, you can kind of take a step back and say, how about I play this with you? And then that kind of helps open them up a little bit. If they're very chatty and excited, then you can move in a different direction, right? So just kind of gauge how they're reacting with you. I've had students come in and they are just terrified. So I spend a great deal of time just trying to get them comfortable with me. And we joke around or, try to do something that they like, just anything that will help them calm down a little bit. I've had students, about halfway through their first lesson, he asked, I'm just so confused. And I said, what do you mean? He says, when are you going to yell at me? And I was like, what are you talking about? He said, aren't music teachers supposed to be mean? And so these little things that pop up, they just surprise me sometimes. I'm like, no, hopefully not all, but I'm a nice one, so let's just relax and have fun and learn the clarinet, right? So just getting that sort of initial awkwardness over with helps a lot too. And then listen to them play without interruption. I just say, play something that you feel confident about. It could be anything, a scale, it could be a tune that you like from the radio, it could be something from your band music, and just listen to them play. And just listen like you're listening to the radio and you're just enjoying yourself. And then I usually ask, well, what do you think about your playing? And that way you can kind of get an idea of what they know about their own playing, and it kind of helps you just gauge, okay, how knowledgeable are they about their playing? And maybe they are positive and they say, oh, I really love that I can do this. Or maybe they say, oh, I do everything wrong. And then you kind of get an idea of like, okay, this kid probably beats themselves up a lot. So it just tells you a lot when they self-assess. And then I always start with something positive, even if it's really rough. So I've had students come in, and I'm sure you guys have too, where it's just really weak all around. Everything's very weak. And it's a struggle to find something positive to say. So sometimes I might lead with, oh, well, tell me why you chose this piece. Is this one of your favorites? And then you can just talk about the music, if you're really struggling to find something positive. And then if there is something really good, you can say, oh, I really like how you held that half note for full value, or I like how you really showed the dynamics here. Just something positive to start with. And then you can choose one thing to improve. If you think about a first encounter with either a class or a private student, they're probably terrified. They're still trying to get used to you. And if you say, well, your articulation is weak, your hand position is atrocious, your tone could really use some improvement, and you just list all of these things, it's very scary and defeating for them, right? So I think of one thing I can do to make an immediate improvement in the sound. So like this lesson I had on Wednesday, we worked on air and connecting across the break. So that was the main thing we did. And then celebrate any success. I make a big deal about it. I'll get like really excited, like, yeah, that was it. You did it. Do you hear how that was different? And I try to keep it really upbeat. Or I'll give them a high five, just depending on what their mood is like. So that was that first half of that. So if any questions have popped up, I could go ahead and address those if there's anything for the people that are here live. Jessica, has anything popped up?
I have a question for you, Kristen.
Sure.
When you're working with a student, and do you have any kind of questionnaire or anything that you would go through, especially younger students, that you would possibly give to a parent to touch on, potential for neurodiversity or disabilities that may be invisible with a student before you get started teaching them?
Yeah, in an email, I usually ask typical questions. I say, how old are they? What grade are they in? What school do they go to? How long have they played the clarinet? Do they play other instruments? I ask what chair they are, if they have chair assignments in their class, how many clarinets are in the class, and then I'll ask, what are some reasons why you're seeking lessons? Because it could be that they're behind, or it could be that they want to get ahead because they're such a good player, right? So why are you seeking lessons? And then I say, is there anything that I should know about their learning style? And I keep it kind of generic that way. So it's just, is there anything I should know about their learning style? And if they do have something that they struggle with, or something I should know about like ADHD or something, they can say that if they want to. If they don't, I usually pick up on it pretty quickly because I have ADHD and I can kind of gauge my people, right? So I can pick up on that. I can pick up on autism fairly quickly too. And sometimes I'll have that first lesson and then the parent will tell me, oh, he has autism. I'm like, yeah, I know. I picked that up pretty quickly. So, unless it's something very hidden like dyslexia or, something like that, I'm not going to pick up on that. So they would need to share that with me. And then I just take that into account as I go forward with the lessons.
Right. While we have a brief pause here, I'll just encourage anyone in a session to feel free to type questions in the chat so that Kristen can answer them as she goes along through the presentation. We'll have some stopping points and then we'll have a general time for questions at the end. So
Yeah,
I think that's all we have for now. Kristen, you can keep going.
Cool. And if there are other teachers watching, which I would hope there are, feel free to add your 2 cents also, because this is just, like I said, this is my experience and what has worked for me. So, all right, so this next part here, here's another big one. So align your teaching with their goals, at least at the start. So, for instance, if you have a student that comes to you and says, there's a talent show in 2 months, I want to learn how to play Defying Gravity on the clarinet, right? And if you think to yourself, oh, you know, I have a very strategic plan with how I teach, and we must start with this, and we must start with this, then you just lose them, right? They're gone. And it's not, oh, I lost the student. It's you lost the connection too. Like, you lost the ability to connect with that student. So 2 months away, who cares? Okay, let's print Defying Gravity. Let's put it in a key that's going to make some challenges, or at least cross the break, like if they're a middle school kid. And align your teaching with that goal and get them to that goal, and you're going to cover fundamentals along the way, right? Let's say you pick something in the key of E flat. So now that you have to work on an E flat scale, you've got to work on E flat arpeggios. You've got to figure out, oh, there's articulation in there, so let's work on that. You're going to cover it, right? And then after the talent show, then you can say, okay, now let's get into a typical lesson style with me. And you've already got them. So that's a big one. Start with the materials they already have. So I usually ask, okay, what books do you already own? What books do you have from school? Do you guys have any like pass-off scale sheets that you use at school? Because if they have something they're already practicing in a very specific way, I would rather just reinforce that than suddenly change everything. A lot of bands will have those warm-up books with scales and very certain rhythms and certain patterns. So it's like, well, let's just start with that. So I start with what they have, and that keeps things from being too overwhelming. Like, you need to go buy this, you need to start with this, and we're going to change this. So start with what they have. If they're like a kid that auditions, they'll probably have like the All-State book, if it's an etude book or whatever they might already have. And then I like to involve the students with decisions. So let's say they're ready for something like, or just ready for an etude book. And I'll pick 2 or 3 that are at their level. And I'll show them a few of them. I might even play a few samples from each book. And like, here's kind of the layout. Which one is speaking to you? And I let them choose, because it makes no difference to me as long as they're learning what they're supposed to be learning. So I like to give them choices. Same thing with solo time. I'll pick 2 or 3 solos that I think would fit for the student, and I involve them with that decision. And that helps them take ownership to it also. And if there's a tune that they like and you didn't even expect they would like that one, it's like, all right, well, they really like this one. They're going to really practice it. And then I check in a lot, especially in the first 3 or 4 months. Like every 2 or 3 weeks, I say, okay, let's do a quick check-in. Is this material too difficult, too easy, or just about right? Am I giving you enough? Am I giving you too much? Are you overwhelmed? Because, you know, I have to say, you know, I'm here to help you. So if I'm overwhelming you, that's a bad thing, right? And if I'm not challenging you enough, that's also a bad thing. So you have to be honest with me so that we can progress and meet your goals. So I'm real direct with that, with those check-ins. And then I like to also keep them informed about opportunities, you know, like, hey, there's a local youth orchestra and there's a clarinet opening. So if you want to know about this, here's that opportunity. Or I make sure they know about ICA, which is a good one, right? To let them know about that kind of opportunity. And I kind of open up their world and help them see, like, the clarinet world, once you get past high school, it's like all these things are happening. There's all these concerts and there's these conferences you can go to, and there's equipment and things you can try, and there's honor bands, there's camps and things that you can go to, and festivals in the summer. So I like to keep them informed as much as I can about any opportunities that come up. Here's another big one. So I treat every student as if they will be a professional someday, because you never know what they're going to do. I was determined that I was going to be a math major. So people change their mind. And if you treat someone, let's say they're 11th grade and they have a flaw in their playing, and they say, well, I'm going to major in social sciences or social justice. You still want to treat it as if they could be a pro at some point. So every time there's a little flaw in a fundamental, fix it. If you ignore it because you think, oh, they're not going to go on with music, I think that's just lazy teaching. So make sure that all of their fundamentals are really solid, because really, as long as they have those strong fundamentals after high school, if they can go on to college and do music, they might go on and play in a community band. There's so many things that people will do with music, and they might even come back to it later. They might take a 10-year gap and then come back. And if you treated them like they were going to go pro, hopefully those fundamentals come right back when they get back into their playing. And then be true to yourself. Yes, I've given you all these tips. This is just how I do things. If you try to apply all of these things and it's not your personality, it's just not going to work. They can smell that dishonesty, right? So make sure you are yourself, and maybe one or two of these things would work for you to try to add, or something that you already do, you're like, hey, I already do that. But just be true to what you think you could actually do if you wanted to add one of these things to your arsenal of ideas. And then here's another big one. Be a human. You've got to be realistic that nobody's perfect, including yourself. You've got to admit your mistakes. If a student asks you a question and you have no idea, just say, I have no idea, but I know where I can find that. So let's search for it together, or I'll search for it this week and get back to you at your next lesson, something like that. And be honest with kindness. I'm honest with my students, especially once we've got a good rapport 3 or 4 months in, and maybe we hit a wall and it's like, okay, these things are really solid, but I'm your teacher and I have to be honest with you that this is your biggest weakness, so we really got to dig in on that. If I ignore it, that's me being a bad teacher. So I want to be a good teacher for you, and we're going to really hit this. So I make sure I'm honest, but I'm kind about it. And then I'm open to learning. So you've got to be open to adjusting. If something is totally failing in your teaching, you got to kind of take a step back and say, okay, how can I do this differently? Who can I talk to that might help me with an idea about this? Go to conferences, go to master classes, get ideas from other teachers. Most of the things that I do, I think, are ideas I've learned from other people, and then I've sort of morphed it into my own thing. So I think that's a great thing, that we share ideas. So I think that might be the end of that. So are there any questions on that? I'm going to go through my big no-nos here in a second.
There is a question in the chat from Jen. Jen, do you want to read your question?
Hi. Sure. Do you use your own method books with your students? Whom do you use them with?
Yeah.
Is it primarily the students who are looking for your guidance on what to do next? So long-term students, what I mean by that is somebody who's kind of really looking to you for, I'm in this for the long term, I really want to get better, versus that student who says, I have an audition next week.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't really have very many students that are short-term students. So sometimes they might think they're going to be a short-term student, and they usually buy in. If they do not buy in, there's just a bad fit, right? And I'm honest too, like, you can tell, right? But yeah, most of my students are long-term students, and I do pair like prep steps. When they are upper middle school, high school, and they're working on scale studies, I like to use the Albert scales, and I will pair prep steps with that. So we might do like odds of the Albert scales, and then odds of the prep steps of the same key. And then the next week we do the evens of that Albert scale, evens of prep steps, because the prep steps really complement scale study work. So I use that one. And of course, I've had that book longer, so I've applied it with students more often. When I was writing the Etude books, it was mostly during COVID. All of my students were online at that point, and I stopped recruiting. So I had like 6 seniors graduate that year. So then boom, 6 people off my studio. So it just kept getting smaller because I stopped recruiting during COVID. But what was happening when I was writing those etudes is students were playing them as guinea pigs. So I was just assigning them as sort of guinea pig work. But now, post-COVID, I do use the finger fitness etudes. I usually will alternate between like a rose etude and then a finger fitness etude. And that way they're kind of getting the standard work in along with the new music that I'm writing, right? So that's kind of the general how I do that. All right, so I'll go through my big no-nos. These are a few things that I've experienced myself, like a teacher doing towards me, or things I've done and thought, oh, that was a huge mistake. I will never do that again. So these are just some things that are for me. So big no-no, be scary, be intimidating, cross the line, break the law. It needs to be said, right? So there's been a lot of scary, intimidating teachers, which I think is so unnecessary. And I'll just say that. Going on and on about yourself, me, I've got this accolade and I've got this award and blah, blah, blah. Especially with the young students, they don't care. When I go to a middle school and the teacher's like, I'm going to introduce you, I say, just say, this is Miss Chambers. She's going to help you with the clarinet today. Because if they go on and on and on, I mean, they just check out and you can see it. So I just want to say, keep it simple. Here's another good one. This was something I experienced. A teacher, the very first lesson I had with this teacher, and this was a not permanent person, I should say. So it was like a temporary teacher. Told me everything I should be doing, everything I should be practicing before I played a single note. And I was just so turned off by that. Like, how do you even know? You haven't even heard me play yet. So that's a big no-no, I think. It turned me off. Here's another one. Change too much right away. Like, oh, your clarinet needs to be upgraded. You need all these books, and we've got to address your articulation, your hand position, and this. It's just too much, right? So pick one thing. We kind of talked about that before. But changing too much right away can be really scary. Saying what's wrong without a concrete plan to improve it. Someone that might just say, you just need to practice this more. Well, maybe they might not know exactly what they need to do. Get concrete with them, maybe practice it with them, give them some really solid ideas on how to improve something. That one didn't happen to me, but it happened to a student that told me about it. She just says, just practice it more. Avoid having your own agenda that conflicts with their goals, right? So let's say the student says their ultimate dream is to play on a cruise ship. Right? But then you're like, no, we're going to practice orchestral excerpts because that's what you should be doing. So, align with their goals and avoid having your own agenda. And if you only want students that are going to audition for orchestras, then you need to be clear about that up front, right? So you want to have a good fit for your own studio if that's what you want to focus on. Avoid speaking poorly about other students, teachers, and programs. That's a big one. Keeping it professional. Even with the middle school, high school level, you got to keep it professional. And then the typical engaging in pettiness, politics, exclusions, that can turn kids off, right? That kids can smell that. It looks bad, right? And then making decisions without student feedback, you're going to do it this way or you're out. So watch out for stuff like that. I avoid that stuff. And then the last big no-no, I avoid this at all cost. Did you practice? It's so common to be the first question people ask at the beginning of a lesson. Did you practice? And it becomes a habit. I've seen it with especially young students and teachers saying, did you practice? I avoid that. I say, how was your week? And then they might share, oh, I had this and this. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then I might say, well, what did you work on the most? Because that's an easy way to ask a question like that. And then you hear them play what they worked on the most or something. And if there's something really weak, I won't say, did you practice? But I might say, did this get enough attention? Did you give this the right amount of attention that it needed? Because if you practice this a lot, I'm concerned. I'll say something like this. But if this was ignored a lot, then I'll understand why that's where it is, right? So, be honest with how you talk about that and make it easy for them to talk about it. I think that's all my big no-nos. And there's probably some more, and I'm sure there's lots that you guys would be able to share too. All right, and then I have my little question answer time if there's any other questions, and then we do have some pre-questions that we can go through as well. Has anything popped up new?
No new questions in the chat right now.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll go through the questions that were prepared ahead of time, or at least sent to me ahead of time. All right. Is engaging the parents part of student buy-in? Yes. The short answer is yes. Often the parent is the first person that reaches out when we're talking about middle school, high school level, pre-college level students. So yeah, and that's when I ask those questions like I listed before, where I ask, all about the student, what grade they're in, why they want lessons, all of that stuff. And I make sure my communication is clear with the parents as well. I have lesson policies on my website, so I usually send them a link to that. Please go through this. Let me know if you have any questions. And I think having that also helps to show, it shows my expertise without me having to brag about it, right? Have a good website. Have a place you can point your people to. Say, here, you can go to this website to learn about me. You can read my bio. You can see my lesson policies. You could even hear some recordings of me playing. And that can be enough. Then the parents can be like, okay, I'm going to go look at that. And how that looks will tell them a lot. So yes, is the short answer. Do you use your own materials? And we covered that. Jen asked that question. So I'll go ahead and bypass that one. The most common problems you see, with young students, and how have you addressed it? There are two big ones. Articulation is a huge one, and I think that's a pretty common thread, because with articulation in the clarinet, most of it is inside the mouth, right? We're unable to see what's going on, so we have to use our ears and our eyes to dissect what's going on. And there are so many different varieties of weaknesses that can come up, and so many different things that students do. So I listen as close as I can. I myself had articulation problems. I used to tongue the roof of my mouth before a proper clarinet teacher got a hold of me and fixed that. So I can hear that because I recognize that. I can recognize anchor tonguing really easily. So once I recognize there's an issue, I just ask a lot of questions. I say, tell me where your tongue is hitting the reed. And if they say, wait, I'm supposed to be touching the reed? Then they're tonguing on the roof of their mouth. Or tell me what part of your tongue is tonguing the reed. And I have them kind of touch and think. And then I'll say, well, tell me, is your tip of your tongue stuck behind your teeth like this? And are you tonguing with the middle of your tongue? So I ask a lot of questions like that to kind of get to the bottom of it. And then I typically will go through reed buzzing, which I don't know if very many of you have done that before, but that is where you literally just rest your tongue against the reed very gently while you play. And it creates a little bit of a muffly sound, but it helps you be really precise with what your tongue is doing. And you just buzz and let go, buzz and let go. I can play so you can see what I'm talking about. You get that little bit of a tickle. Oftentimes when students start that, they'll get a sound like this. Because they're approaching it too rough, right? So if you just barely touch, it'll get that little muffly sound. And I usually say, pretend like you're taking a photo and the photographer says, put your hand like this, but don't squish your face, right? So you're just barely touching it so it looks good, right? It's the same idea to buzz. And that I get them to do that because it helps them really concentrate on what they're doing. And then once we get a good buzz back and forth, I usually use the Daniel Bonad method of staccato from chapter 3 of his Clarinet's Compendium. That has been my go-to. That's what fixed my articulation. So what worked for me, I use with my students for sure. The other one that I come across a lot is just weak connections across the registers. So like with the student I worked with Wednesday, he had one sound down low, then he crossed the break and had a different sound, a completely different sound. And it was because the air was weak down low and then the air was strong up high. And it's like, well, let's get the air to be strong everywhere so that when you connect, there's no bump, right? So we worked on that. And I like to do, let's say you're playing a C and then open G and then C. So instead of going oh, we want to work on G to C, and you're working on that, I go high, low, high. So I'll play C, open G, back to the C. So they remember what that C felt like, and that the G will have the same kind of strength in the air. So I do a lot of that high, low, high practice. The next one, can you talk about the process of composing your etude books? This is a really long topic. I'll try to be brief. So I basically was trying to figure out how to address fundamentals in a way that would be fun, right? And I was like, okay, finger drills are something that I assign my students. I assign them those close finger drills, those fun low pinky drills, and then the ones that are just really basic ones. And, they practice them a little bit, but I wish they would spend more time on them, right? And so I thought, well, how can I get a finger drill into maybe a piece of music that would make it more fun? And then that's how the whole finger fitness etudes thing was born. And what I started with is I just picked an interval. So I was like, okay, I'm going to start at the very bottom of the clarinet, and we're just going to do half steps. So that's the beginning of book 1. So I've got E to F, and then hit the register key, B to C. So that's the finger drill, and I put that on the page, and then I just sat there and I kind of noodled with that. I just played low, and here's the first etude is called First Flight, and I literally just sat there. And noodled around until something sort of appeared in my brain. And then I just kind of took it from there. So I would love to say that my stuff is more planned, but it's a little more organic. It just, like a little idea or a little motive will pop out as I start to noodle around, and then I just kind of go with it. I've had tunes that pop into my ear, and I run in here and try to write it down, or I grab my phone and sing it really fast. I'm like, oh, I could use that. So I don't really have much of a method to my madness. It just kind of happens. But I when I have the little assignment, or I have a parameter, like these little finger drills that I've picked, that really helps. So when I've I recently wrote etudes for the state of Illinois for their auditions, which I'm really excited about. That's coming out soon. They're going to be doing, they've commissioned etudes for all of their instruments by composers instead of using an etude book or something like that. So Eric Mandat wrote a set, I wrote a set, and I don't know if there's another clarinet set. But I used the theme of Chicago. So everything has to do with Chicago. And then they gave me very specific parameters on range and rhythms that can be included. And I just ate that up. The more parameters I have, the easier it is for me to be creative. If it's too open-ended, it's too hard. So I need to have some kind of parameter, or if I'm doing a commission, I need an idea. Like, well, what kind of style are you looking for? Or what kind of story can you share with me that might help me get an idea for this music? So that is the very short answer of how that happens. But once it starts going, then it's all about organization. And to be honest, once you do one, and anybody else who's published a book or an article, once you do one, it just lays the foundation to do more if you liked that. If you liked that idea, it's like, oh, now I know how to do this. And then it just got easier, which is really cool because I never thought I'd be doing this, so that's kind of nice. All right, and we can always have follow-ups on that too if there's other questions about it.
Kristen, we did get in a couple questions in the chat. So Megan asks, what is your advice for building relationships with band directors in a new city? So starting a studio when you are new to the community.
I have a lot of experience with that because I've been in Colorado like a year and a half. And it's been weird here. I will just say Colorado is strange. Because when I moved from Colorado to Oklahoma, I had really nice luck of contacting band directors. Of course, I had, people kind of still knew me there, but I contacted directors. I sent emails. I sent things in the mail also. I followed up with phone calls. it also helped that there was some connections like with that. But let me go to Colorado. So moving back here after being gone from Colorado for 10 years has honestly been a struggle. I started out with contacting band directors through email. So I emailed just about every director in the district that's close to me, and I got nothing, no responses at all. And I was like, okay, I need to change my angle. So I made this really nice letter. I included one of my posters, and I put a pen, I had a little gift, and I put that in a firm mailer, like a rigid mailer. And I was like, okay, I'm going to mail this to the directors. I got nothing. I was like, what is going on with this district? So what ended up happening was I was like, okay, I need to take a step further. And I applied to be a substitute in the district. And that got my foot in the door with a band program that I actually started working with and assisting with. I used to be a band director. So I'm assisting with this band program, and that was how it got me in the door. And man, it's been a struggle, but that got me some connections, and now I work with like the local youth orchestra, and I coach the clarinets for that. I have a couple of students from it. But the climate out here is different. So depending on where you are, like I would say Texas, Oklahoma, Indiana, I think is another big one, another big hub where like private lessons are just part of band, and they'll even have private lesson staff, So if you're in a place like that and you're contacting a band director, really anywhere, offer to do a free class. And I did that for Colorado too. Offer to do a free class. Like, hey, I'd love to come and work with your students, and I'd be glad to do that for free if you would like me to have me come out or whatever. Or you could be more direct. Hey, next week I'm free on Thursday. What class could I come and help you with? And band directors are busy, so you do have to keep that in mind. A lot of times emails they're just low priority, right? If it's not something pertinent. Even the mail will stack up. When I was a band director in Arkansas, our mail would just stack up on the desk higher and higher. And then when we finally had a break to go through stuff, we'd go through it and be like, oh, that was last month. Whoops, I missed that opportunity. So it's just, band directors are busy, so you have to know somebody. You got to get in the door somehow. And it is tough sometimes. And I think post-COVID, the climate has changed too. Like priorities are different for a lot of students and parents. Budgets are different for a lot of parents. So I've had to get creative. I'm teaching a few online. I have a student from Oklahoma, so it's just, I've got a student in Canada. So I've had to just sort of piece things together in that way. But keep at it. If you're hitting walls, keep at it. Get to where maybe you go to the concerts, like just show up at the band concerts and then go talk to the director. That's another thing that you could do. You say, oh, I really loved your concert. The clarinet sounded great. Here's some things that I could really help them do better if you'd like me to come out and do a class. So there, just brainstorm anything you could think of. And if you're really, if that's your goal is to just recruit private students, you've got to just hit the pavement. All right.
Oh, I actually have a question for you, Kristen, if
Sure.
that's okay.
Okay.
So I am a college teacher now, but I've taught all levels. Like I used to have a ton of pre-college students. And I just have a question for you because I have what I do with students, but something that is hard is when a student struggles with rhythm and just feeling pulse. So I was wondering how you approach teaching students who struggle with rhythm or have difficulty feeling pulse in music. And then do you have any specific techniques or exercises that help them improve in these areas, or just, things you do when a student struggles with this?
I have somebody in mind I'm thinking of right now. She was beautiful tone, had wonderful fingers, but man, the pulse was just never there. So it was a long process, and she finally did get better, but it was like a lot of trial and error, right? You try everything. I tried everything. So we would play scales with a fun drum track from YouTube, right? So I like to pick drum tracks rather than metronome for the kids that struggle to feel pulse, because a metronome is just another distraction, because it's a click and it's annoying, right? But a cool drum track, it's like you can feel that, you can internalize that. Sometimes I have them stand up and march to it, or even just sway to it, or dance to it, clap, whatever. And it's like, okay, now let's put a scale to that, and then try to feel the beat that way. I do a lot of subdividing work, which I'm sure you guys do. Just, let's play some half notes, but we're going to subdivide. I even have them pulse their air, if you've had that. So let's say you're doing half notes. So it's like a pulse in the air to feel the subdivision. I make them listen to songs from the radio, and I have them clap. And once they start to get it, I say, okay, now only clap on beat 3. And I get them to find that and be confident with that. And it is just a long process. It's a really hard thing to fix. Lack of pulse is so hard.
I know.
That student, she did get better. I would also record practice tracks for her with a metronome on or a drum track on.
Yeah.
And just say, practice along with me, right? Just take this home and keep playing it over and over again. Listen to me play it, play along with me playing it. Just do fingers and listen to it, and then you play it by yourself, and then come back and play it again along with me. It just took a while. It finally did click, and she's a music major now, so that's good. But yeah, it took some time, and just anything you can come up with. Makes me think of that Mr. Collins opus, beat him on the football helmet with the drumstick, right? That poor kid. And he finally found the beat, remember?
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Number 5, guidance on working with students with exceptionalities. We kind of covered that a little bit when a parent, especially if a parent shares up front. But I basically approach every student in a similar way, but just, you follow your flow chart. If this, then that, right? So if this struggle, then you're going to approach this way. Just take a step back. If you have your basic expectation, well, let me hear your C major scale. And they can't even make a sound. It's like, oh, well, let's work on breathing and blowing. Let's just get your barrel and mouthpiece. Let's just do that. So you just base it on what's happening. I had a student with some learning challenges, and I don't know exactly what it was. I think to be short, she was just low IQ. So I just had a totally different pace with her, and it was, she was a high school student, but sort of had the maturity level of, maybe an elementary student. So we just played a lot of fun music, and just made it as fun as we could be. But I still had high standards for her, but just standards that aligned with what she was capable of doing, right? So I think if you go through kind of my whole buy-in, then you've already come to this, right? You've already figured out, oh, this is what they need, and I'm going to scale to that student. You can still have your high standards. I always have high standards, but it's like, scale it to their abilities, right? The 6th one is, how has your teaching philosophy evolved over time, and what have you learned? It just changes constantly. I think when you're young, you absorb what your teachers taught you, and you just try to regurgitate that because it worked for you, so I'm just going to regurgitate that. And then you might hit a wall, and it's like, there's got to be another way to address this one thing. Let me get creative about it. So you try to get creative. I've used different methods of teaching things. I used to be really big on the circle of fourths, circle of fifths, and I would use that with teaching scales, and then I've kind of morphed to other ways of doing it, but I still bring that up over from time to time. But we all have our tools that we use, and it's like, let me try a different tool. And then as you try other things, you can kind of see how it works. And the main thing I've learned from that is just you always need to be open to learning and adjusting your teaching, because why not, right? So we want to get better at what we're doing. Hopefully you want to get better at what you're doing. How do you manage classroom personalities like the shy kids versus the dominant kids? This one is kind of easy for me because I'm a shy kid. I was a shy kid. So I know what the shy kids want. So instead of asking for volunteers, I usually just call on kids. That way I'm calling on a variety of shy versus outgoing kids. I might have a shy kid come up and I'll do something individual with them, right? And I just make sure that everybody gets involved even if they wouldn't volunteer on their own. I do a lot of group things. If I go in and do a clinic, I pair them up and okay, now watch your buddy, what are they doing? And I just, get them involved that way. And that kind of ties into the next question. What are the biggest challenges in a group setting? I mean, depending on the ages, right? So middle school, they just tend to be squirrely and talkative, right? And you never know what you're going to run into, right? High school, you just never know on that too. I've been at high schools where it's like you could hear a pin drop and it's a little bit awkward. You know, you're trying to get them excited and involved and they're just nothing. And that's a challenge. Like, I can't read your mind, man. You know, you got to give me something. But yeah, when they're squirrely, I just try to do something fun. I'll walk around the room and make sure I'm involved. Make sure everyone has something that they're doing all the time. So if I'm working with one person, I'll say, okay, everybody listen, because I'm coming to you next. I'll say that, right? And I'm have the student play, like, oh, what did she do right? And I make them answer. So they all have to be paying attention. They can't check out. And like I said, I walk around the room, try to make it fun, try to make it funny. You know, you can have fun while you're doing this stuff. And if it's very strict and straight and, you know, do it this way, do it my way, I mean, that can turn off a lot of the young kids especially. You can always, if you know you're going to be with them for a long time, you can start light and then they buy in, right? It's the same kind of idea. And then you show your expectations, like, all right, I'm going to give you a 2-minute break, but after that 2-minute break, we got to come right back. Can we do it? All right, ready, set, go. And I make it kind of a game. So, because I like to have a break in the middle of a long class, things like that. And the high school kids that were straight-faced, they got better. It was just a very big challenge when there was just no talking at all. The opposite of what you might think would be a challenge. You know, I had to just pull it out of them, which was hard, but they all got better. And then this one was sent to me from somebody. So he says, how can you get students enthusiastic about listening to recordings? So one of the first things that I do, let's say private lessons, is I have a clarinet mix of a variety of music, solo pieces, solo clarinet alone, or concertos, duets, quartets, and then a variety of styles, you know, different. I've got some klezmer stuff on there, some jazzy things on there, some Michael Lowenstern on there because he's my favorite. And so I have them like, hey, listen to this and tell me which ones you liked. And then they'll come back and say, oh, I like track number 7 and track number 9 and whatever. So whatever they told me they like, then I'll give them more of that, and that gets them enthusiastic about listening. And then, you know, during the lesson, I'll pull up something like, look how cool this is, and just be excited about it. The other thing about, you know, the difference between whenever I was younger, and I think there's some people in this group that are about my age, when we wanted to listen to something, we had to either go to the music library or we had to like literally go buy the CD, right? And so now there's so much overwhelming, everything's on YouTube. And sometimes when you have everything, it's also overwhelming, you know? But if you show them, like, here's how you could search this. Because there's a lot of great videos on teaching too, like how to do a glissando on the clarinet. There's a lot of people who have made good videos of that. So even if they're just listening to something like that, that's great. So if they're watching how-to videos, and then I'll teach them like how to tell the difference between someone who really knows what they're talking about and someone who's just sort of, I don't know. So you kind of compare those, and you have to show them how to be discretionary too, just like when you search something online, not everything's the best, right? Same thing with the videos. So it's very interesting to see that, and I try to get them excited, and I ask them about what kind of music they like, because I'll be honest, my playlist in my car often has very little classical music, right? So I like to know what they like, and then if I can find something that's similar, clarinet-wise, then I'll say, oh, if you like this popular musician, then I bet you would like this style of clarinet music, and then I try to pair with what they already like. And then once they start listening, they'll hopefully start doing it on their own, but it's just getting that first bite. Just, it's kind of like buy-in for listening to music too, right? You can make it part of their assignment, and force it if you want to, but oftentimes if you get them a nice itch, they'll just keep going. They'll keep scratching, right? think that's all the pre-asked questions. If there's anything else that's popped up.
So we have one question from Jessica. Do you have any advice for players that have taken a long hiatus and are coming back to the instrument?
Ah, yeah. Go slow, take lots of breaks, and try to avoid judging yourself too soon. I've had to take lots of breaks. I took oh man. Yeah, I've had to take some breaks due to physical things. And when I come back, I just hate my sound. I hate that I have no endurance, right? That's like the first thing that goes. It's like I can only play for 5 minutes and my mouth is just on fire. So play frequently, take lots of breaks, avoid self-judging, just know it will get better. Sometimes I would even practice with music playing. Like I'll just pick some random music and I'm just playing random notes just to get my mouth in shape so that I can just stop listening to myself play if I hate my sound. But yeah, it just takes time, and be patient with yourself. Know that it'll get better. Avoid the self-judging. Yeah, those are the big ones, I think. I've set up a special discount for today. So anyone who's listening live and anybody who listens to the recording through tomorrow night, so through midnight on March 30th, this discount will give you 25% off any books, sheet music, including the bundles, which is a huge discount. If you use that LunchLearn25 code in my website, clarinetplayground.com. If you've never heard of Clarinet Playground, go to the website and go to the store. At the very bottom, there are 4, maybe 5 totally free sheet music items. Get those first and you kind of get an idea of what my style is like. And also, if you look at the books, there are 4 sample pages from every book just in the listing, and then you can get an idea of what the books are like. But yeah, check those free items out first is usually what I say, and then check the sample pages. And then you can use that discount, get a really nice discount on books and music.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And then feel free to contact me too. You can go to the website and there's a contact form. Or I've got my email here. Here's my email, clarinetplayground@gmail.com.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was great. I think we all learned a lot. And it was just nice to hear your thoughts on teaching. And so thank you for your time today.